and broadcasting on YouTube before a live audience.
Hold on, Sid. We'll start again because we normally lose the first 15 seconds. Right, let's get this show on the Frog and Toad.
Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to Live TV, where for the very first time we're recording live and broadcasting to YouTube before a live audience. So throughout the show, you'll be able to contribute and ask any questions you may have, or give us some comments about what you're discussing. But let's begin by welcoming two special guests, the veritable Paul and Barry of Wargaming. We have Nick Skinner and Richard Clark.
Hello, Sid.
Welcome to the live podcast.
Thank you, Sydney, and thank you and hi to everybody who's joining us. Hello, Paul and Evesham. Hello, Jeremy and Barry. Hello, Tamsin in London. Hello, all.
So probably
Scott from Dornick in Bavaria.
So what we should say at the start is that this is our first live show. If you lose us or if we lose you, we apologise in advance, and we will try and get the service back. But hopefully all will be going according to plan, apart from the fact that Richard now seems to have disappeared from his chair. Here he is.
I thought that was our big chance there, Sid. I thought we were just going to do it without him.
I forgot my drink.
I've got mine.
Well, welcome everyone to the show. We're going to start off by just asking ourselves, I think, Rich, Nick, it's not been very long since we last did an oddcast, but I was thinking, well, can you tell us what you've been doing in the last week or so, please?
Yes, I can. Would you like me to share it? I've got some things I can show you over the magic of the internet, if you like. Some things that I've been painting, Sydney.
Is it legal?
Yeah, it is. Completely legal. I'm going to show you 6 men to start with. Here we go. So if you follow me on Twitter, you might have seen these guys. These are, if I could just get them there so some of you can see them. Ooh, don't they look all right, actually? They are a mixture of artisan and crusader. They're dismounted recce, is my idea. These are the guys that get out of the Daimlers and go and have a nose around the bridge, etc. So there's 6 figures there, including the guy in the jumper. I thought that was in keeping with the traditions of wearing what they like, basically, when they're on campaign. So there's those 6 of those. Really pleased with them. They've been quite good fun, and they've been finished. Now let me show you something else. Look at this. Can you see what this is?
Yes, it's a Sherman Dozer.
It's a Sherman Dozer. It's let me be more precise. It's a Corgi Sherman.
Yeah. With
a 3D printed bulldozer blade on the front.
Right. Can you pull it back from the camera?
This is what I was talking about on the Oddcast.
No, back. Take it away from the camera.
Take it away from the camera. Yeah. How far?
Put it in front of your face so we don't have to look at that.
This is big and this is far away.
Yeah. Okay? Well, it looks better far away.
It looks so do you, mate. So there you go. And watch this. Watch. Oh dear, I've broken it. No, I haven't, because it's stuck on with magnets.
All right.
So I've now got a perfectly workable Corgi Sherman and a dozer blade that I can throw away. Good, eh?
Just like that.
Now, yeah, and I want to show you 2 more things. Isn't finished yet,
right? But
I mentioned it last time, so let me share it again. There we go. There's an M10, British M10, coming almost done. Just got to do the sort of final bits on it, really, and maybe put a crew inside it. So that's really pleased with that. It's going to look fantastic. The sandbags on the front are actually from a kit that I purchased, and it's got, they come as one piece, designed for a Sherman, but I thought I'd put it on the front of the M10 just to make it look interesting. So that's yeah. Okay, share that one and one other, and tell me if you can spot. This is a quiz now. Tell me if you can spot the error on this. There's an error that I only spotted it last night when I was painting this, and I'm in 2 minds whether or not I can be bothered to fix it. So if you're a tank aficionado, you will spot this, and let me see if you can. Here we go. Here's a Sherman Firefly. Okay, 70. It's got the big 17-pounder gun. It's a Blitzkrieg model. It's one of the ones that I undercoated with the primer and got away with. Now let me show you. If I show you this bit, have a look at it. You spotted what it is yet? That could be wrong about it. There we go. There's the Sherman. There's the top view. The turret is all there. Nice Firefly, ready to go. What do you think? Do you like it?
No, it's horrible. Hello, Jimmy Hansen in Sweden.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's special about that Sherman, but I'm probably not the person to be asked that question.
There's something that's very wrong about it. And I don't know if I'm going to get away with it or not.
The hatch arrangement.
If nobody gets away, if nobody notices it, I'll get away with it. I won't bother changing it.
The hatch arrangement is wrong.
Yeah, correct. The hatch arrangement is wrong. That's the top of the Firefly turret. The top of the Firefly turret was adapted and should have the second hatch on it like that.
That's right.
But me being a bloody idiot,
the
Sherman that I got with the ordinary hatch, I was so keen to do it, I put the wrong bleeding gun on that turret. So I'm now thinking, shit, or words to that effect. I've got the wrong gun on the wrong turret. Can I be bothered to change it? And I don't know the answer to that yet.
Tell me, did you stick it on with super glue?
Highly likely. If I waggle it out a bit, it still hasn't broken. What I'll do, Rich, I think, is I'll play a game with you with it, and then when you break it, I'll be able to fix it back on the right way around.
Why don't you put a bit of a camouflage net on the top, just casually draped where the turret hatch should be?
Now that's a good idea. John Emmett has spotted that it was something to do with my commander's turret. Ralph Plowman says it's too small and that you'd never get anyone in it. Well, I don't know where he lives. But he's wrong.
He has met you though, so he knows how big you are.
Yeah, I think that's true.
But at least I'm man enough to admit it and not to just pretend that I never made such an error.
Splendid. Well, Richard, what have you been up to? We've seen Nick's tanks and his magnets and his dozer blade. What have you been up to?
Well, I've been painting stuff for Infamy, and I actually accidentally accumulated a load of Spanish figures, which are going to be more appropriate really for the second, the first supplement, which is going to be covering Spain, North Africa, and the Greek world. So very much Punic Wars, Mithridate War, Numidians, and Celto-Iberians, Iberians, Lusitanians. But they were lovely figures. So I bought them. Excuse me. So I bought them and kind of accidentally had accumulated an army of about 70 or 80 figures. So I got them done. And I had a nightmare that I couldn't get any shield transfers to match the shields. I don't know why. I bought some that was for Crusader Miniatures Scutari shields, and they don't fit the Crusader Miniatures Scutari shield. So I ended up having to paint my own shields, which is a nightmare when you've got half the army with really nice transfer shields and the other that have been painted with what looks like house brush. But never mind, there you go. I mean, they're lovely figures. I don't need to have them on the table yet, other than there's a few allies for Caesar, maybe in Gaul or Britain. But then what I did was I've been painting and making, and you can see we've still got PVA drying on here. This is going to be a rough and ready testudo with Caesarean Romans. I've done 3 different bases. These guys got their hands in the air like they just don't care, all right? And they are the second group. So you can have them like that. And what I've done is, I've made the shields stuck them all together like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then that rear group is going to have them on like that. And the front group is going to have a smaller number like that, which is probably going to fall off because I'm just holding this. But what you can see is what's going to look like a pretty rough and ready testudo. And I think that's going to be quite fun when I'm assaulting the gate of a Gallic oppidum or a British hill fort. But I just wanted to, you don't need to do this. I mean, we've actually got a testudo marker in the in the token set. But I thought, oh, I really fancy doing that. And whilst I've ordered an Imperial Roman Testudo from Black Tree Designs, which after a month still hasn't turned up, so I'm a bit getting a bit bored waiting for that, to be honest with you. And actually, the last time I ordered, and only time I've ordered from Black Tree Designs before, nothing ever turned up anyway. So I'm kind of wondering whether I've chucked 30 quid down the drain. But we will find out. But nobody does them for Romans, so I thought, oh, I'm going to crash them. And I've quite enjoyed doing it. It's been rather more problematic than I thought it would be. It involved a lot of hacking of figures. You can see here's a figure that went wrong. That went very wrong. Right. Here's a figure that went wrong, and you can see where what I've done is I've replaced the arm. I've drilled it out. Let me move it like that. I've drilled it out and put a bit of paper clip in there and put the hand on it again. And I thought, that's so horrible. It's no good, so I've thrown that away now. But yeah, that's really been the thing that I've been mainly doing in the workshop. A few other bits and pieces. I've been working with Paul Edwards at Sabotage, getting the designs right for some Roman field fortifications. There's two sorts in the rules. There's the impromptu ones, which are where the spikes are just stuck up like a fence, basically, like a picket fence, and lashed together, which is a pretty quick but primitive form of defences. And there's the other one where they've lashed the stakes together in a cruciform shape and have then half buried that in the ground. And I've been working with Paul on getting that design done. So there's some coming to me in the post tomorrow, which will be really nice. I've got the basic ones done, the impromptu ones, which are great fun, the more solid ones are coming. So I'm looking forward to seeing them. Fraser asked, "Why do you deal with Black Tree at all? They've been dire for years." Well, so I'm discovering, Fraser. But I just thought, oh look, that Testudo's perfect. And some people I know have plenty of their figures, so they do send them out sometimes. So I can only hope they send them out to me. And if they don't, well, I shall shout about it. But there we go.
Well, so I've had a great tip. Somebody said to me, "Why don't I magnetize the gun? That makes it totally idiot proof." That's Eric Boyle. What a great idea. Magnetize the gun, then you can be a complete idiot and put the wrong gun on the wrong tank as much as you like. It's a good idea. Other people saying make an alternative hatch. Red Mist 1122, make an alternative hatch. I could do that. I did think about that. But then the hatch on the other tank would still be wrong.
So before we go on to me, which will be very brief, I was going to ask you, Nick, about undercoating and spraying. So one of the questions I think we had from Mike Hobbs, hello Mike, what's all this nonsense about priming models grey before spraying them black? Do you enjoy spending hours undercoating miniatures? I just with Halford's matte black straight onto metal, and I've never had a problem. So that's from Mike over in Wales. Well, Nick, what do you think to that question?
He's absolutely right, isn't he? Because I've done that many, many times. And normally, if I was doing any other figure, I'd have just sprayed it black. But because it was Blitzkrieg, and because I was worried that I was going to get this issue about the paint not sticking, I thought I was, in the past, I've always used primer. So I used the primer and then the black. That's the only reason, because they're Black Tree. But otherwise, he's right. And I think next time, I don't think I'll bother, because I haven't primed these and they've come up okay so far. And I would have thought if they were going to come off, they would have started doing that by now. They've been a week. So I would have thought with the handling they've had, they would have come off by now.
Very good. Okay, well, that's the answer to that. I've been carrying on with my 1688 French. We've been having club evenings, as I think probably people know from Twitter, various members of the club. In fact, all of the club have been together on a Zoom call. That's been fantastic fun. We've had 12 or 13 people on the call. I've been steadily working through some more French cavalry. I've kind of did the cavalry first and then forgot about the commanders. So I've been doing the French commanders. So it's been really enjoyable. 28mm 1688 French. So lots of ribbons and lace and peculiar colours, including pink. Yes, I'm sure people will find that tremendously funny. I found pink was a really difficult colour to paint. The deep shade of pink is somewhere between, I think, deep red and actually a sort of a russety brown. So that is a work in progress, I'd say. But one of the things that we always do at the end of the workshop is think about, well, what are the best bits on the bench we've seen? So, Rich, Nick, do you have any candidates? I think I've got one or two, but what are yours?
Well, I've still got something else to show you, Sid, actually. Yeah, I'm going to show you this. What this is? Now, this is a War Bases Dutch house.
That is very Dutch. That is very Dutch.
Look at the roof. That's what you want, buddy. A War Bases Dutch house. And like, it's got windows. Look, 1, 2, 3, 4. A house with a door. And through the square window is a nice War Bases house with their new doors that we spoke about. The doors that can open and close because they're on little hinges. Right, so I've been doing that, and I've got one more thing. Are you still there, Sid, or have you gone off?
No, I remembered we were on video, so we could actually show things.
Yes, I'm going to show you this as well, because I've got a fetish. I think I'm worried. I'm into too many Sherman tanks. Here we are. Look. Nice 1/48 scale Sherman tank for me to make with super glue. And I'm going to do that next week in lockdown. Hooray! I'm done now.
Okay, Rich, did you have anything?
I didn't really. I mean, I have bought a few bits and pieces that I quite like. Whether they qualify as the best bit on the bench, I'm pretty dubious. I bought some little lanterns, which I bought 3D printed on eBay, and now I can't find them. But they're little lanterns, little metal lanterns, you know, like you get in the Tower of London type of thing, a sort of lattice of metal, and they come with a hook, and a plate, so you can mount the plate on a wall, and then attach the hook, and then the lanterns hook on that. Now, for my Roman farmhouse, I thought they're beautiful, just for adding a bit of detail, because with the Roman farmhouse with the courtyard in the middle, you can have things hanging off that are not going to get knocked off, which if you put them on the normal outside of a house model, they would. So I just thought they were really nice little additions. I've kind of been focusing a lot on nice little additions at the moment. So I've been looking on eBay for all sorts of odds and sods, and they, you know, just things like this is from the same company. It's just a little pigsty that's 3D printed, and put that on a base and make a nice little terrain piece, just a little bit of scatter terrain, if you like. I've got this cart. It's a sort of ancient cart with wooden wheels, as you can see. But I can't remember for the life of me who the bleeding hell sells them, and I certainly can't find the lanterns. So that's probably the best bit on the bench ever, because I've no idea where they are or who makes them.
So what gets the best bit on the bench then?
Nothing. Nothing that qualifies. So what about you?
Well, I've got something. So in 2012, I did some trench boards, and I used a product called Solid Water. I'd completely forgotten about it, but I found I'd got quite a bit in the garage, and it's in a two-part, almost like an epoxy, which produces really great water for terrain, dioramas. And I had a small pond, which, can I see that? Yeah, just about, I guess. Try and get the reflection on it. It's a bit fiddly to use. You've got to mix the resin and harden it. It's 2 parts to 1 part. Then you've got to pour it on, and then you've got to let it to set. But some of the solid water type effects that you get are quite spongy, and you can tug them off and pull them on, and they're not really sort of rock hard. Whereas this one is absolutely rock hard, and it's really, really nice. And it reminded me how much fun that was. And that's Solid Water. You can buy it in various different sizes. It's from a company called Deluxe Materials, and they have a website, deluxematerials.co.uk. Solid Water is really great. So if you've got water, you've got rivers, duck ponds, flooded trenches, whatever it is, that's a really great addition. And still on the terrain side, I was doing some 2mm this week, but only for snowy bound figures and terrain. And I came across something which was called 1mm snow, which is just about the strangest description. This is from WSS, who are a scenery manufacturer. I bought a lot of stuff from them. They're very good. And it's really marketed as sort of static grass. This is the white one. There's a green one as well. And it's not really static grass. It's more like cotton dust in white. or indeed in green if you got the grass equivalent. And it's really good. And I think, and I used it for 2 mil. You could use it for 6 mil, 10 mil, probably anything up really to 28 mil, almost like a frost. It's really easy to use. Just a bit of PVA, put that on, it'll dry, put another layer on if you're feeling you need more. And that really sort of tarts up winter terrain or winter figures. So that's another contender for best bit on the bench.
Now, before we make a decision, I want to show something because Warren Bunny, and if that's his real name, I'm a Dutchman. Warren Bunny has just asked the question, what's the difference between 150th and 148th? Well, look, I'll show you. One of these tanks is 150th. Let me see if I can hold this. Turret's going to come off this. One of them is 150th. The other one is 148th. Now, they are, to all intents and purposes, identical. Okay, one's a Corgi, and one is Blitzkrieg. And to be honest, next to each other, you wouldn't even know which one is which. Okay, so they're pretty much 148th and 150th tend to go together beautifully well. And yes, I do use super glue on plastic models, Derek.
Very nice.
I know it's mad, but I do.
Just to finish up a couple of points, just to repeat that on the solid water, this is for Alex at Storm of Steel. It's solid water from deluxematerials.co.uk. And we also had a question from Neil Boscher. He mentions that it's nylon flock, not cotton flock. So thanks very much, Neil. I didn't realise that. I'm happy that it's nylon or cotton. It's very, very small. Anyway, so best bit on the bench, gentlemen. What do we think? Do we think it's my rock hard water, or do you think
I'll give it to you, Sid?
All right, okay. Well, it's been a while for the best bit, so that's great.
Yeah. Plus, you said you could tug it off, and I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah.
moving quickly on from that suggestion. In anticipation of this show, we asked on social media if people had any questions that they'd like us to address on the show, and we had a flurry on Twitter. We had a lot on infamy, but we're going to save that for a later show. But we are going to run through some of the questions that you have given us, and there's been some great questions coming up on the public chat, which we can see in addition to what we're doing on the podcast live. But we're going to kick off with a great question from Dominic in Bavaria. Dominic asks, gentlemen, if you had the chance to set up a new gaming or hobby room in your house, what would it look like?
This, I did. Several years ago, we built the Lard Island office, and it looks like this, which is my desk here. And then off to my right, we've got a 6x4 gaming table. And then behind that, you've got the wall that you can see with the bookshelves in all the filming. Then over here, we've got some more bookshelves. And over there, we've got some more bookshelves. And there, we've got a great big picture window going the full width of the house. So in the summer, we can open that up and use the outside as part of the office as well, which is good. Then we've got the post room further down, and then we've got the workshop further down from that.
So the post room is not part of your ideal setup, surely.
No, it's not. No. But I'm just explaining how it all fits in. So we've effectively got 3 units in a row. We've got the office and the gaming area. So the gaming area for me, that I like it, has got my desk so I can look stuff up, print anything out, and then we've got the table there. And the table is probably one of the highlights because it was purpose built for us by a good mate of mine, Tim. And it's got loads of racking and storage underneath, so I can literally have loads and loads of terrain in here. So probably the most purpose-built thing is the table, which we use an incredible amount, really, and I'm using every day for a game now. But if I had unlimited budget and unlimited space, I'd also like a bar.
I'd have that. I'll go for a separate table, separate entrance, a staff bar in the corner selling hot snacks. That'd be good. Or serving them, not even selling them.
Yeah.
Nice big library, big Chesterfield sofa, big sign above the door saying the Winchester Club.
Yeah.
That would be there. A range of antique weapons on display. Nice suit of armour in the corner. And a photograph of the wife, because I never see her, so I'd have to have a photograph to show me what she looked like.
I think those are all the key ingredients. Those are all the key sort of things. I mean, a separate entrance I think would be very useful, or separate building altogether. Space for a table. I think the table size is an interesting one, because I'm sure all of us have thought at some times, oh, wouldn't it be fantastic to have a sort of 18-foot by 6-foot table, or maybe something like a 10-foot by 5, or whatever it is, something which is bigger than everything. But one of the things which always interested me, Rich, when you built yours, is you built a 6x4, which is absolutely fantastic for every game that we've played on it. And I think that when you're designing games, as you two are, that's really useful. That's the space most people have.
Yeah, it's massively important.
The table was originally 8x6, and I found myself designing games that fitted on an 8x6 table, and you think, I can't do that. So I cut it down, which was kind of a terrible thing to do in a way, but it had to be done. It was the right thing to do. The keg, Jeremy, the keg of beer is immediately behind the screen that you're looking at, and all the beer barrels are actually under the table, taking up some of the storage there. I've taken some of the terrain out and filled the office full of beer.
Well, thanks very much, Dominic, for that question. We'll move on to another question, which is from Colin in Devon. What period or type of game would each of you like to convince the other two to play, and why won't they play it? So, who's going to take that
good question?
I think we're pretty open-minded, to be honest with you. I mean, if Nick came to me and said, I've got this great idea for a set of rules, and it's the Azerbaijani war of the sandwich toasters or whatever, I'd say, let's give it a go. As long as he painted up the bleeding sandwich toasters.
I reckon, funny enough, I've got an idea about that. I reckon that the one that I'd like to get Richard to put some time into is some ideas around a squad level game, because I think there's something around squad level that's really good to explore, and we've had some ideas on that during lockdown. I reckon Sydney would play anything. He's a game kind of guy, and I don't think he would need much persuading to have a dabble. So I think Richard would be the hard one. Actually, the one that Richard wouldn't do, because I don't think he'd put the time into the mechanics, is to play some of the big hex-based strategy games that you remember, Sid, that we played last year, the Bitter Woods and what have you. Richard hasn't got the patience to play those games, and I haven't got the patience to explain them to him either. So we don't play those. We haven't played those. Should we play them more often? I don't know. They're quite interesting to see the strategic overview, but it's the mechanism that's too dry to go for, really. I think that's the only thing. Squad level and maybe a bit of big hex gaming.
I think I'd play almost anything. Well, I have played just about anything. I can't think of a game that I haven't played. There's one or two games that I don't really gravitate towards, but that's just probably because I haven't played enough of them. But I think I've played everything over the years. So that's a very good question. We've got a question which 39 Steps has asked us a couple of times. Thank you very much, 39. And they've asked us whether we think that the Crimean War is something which we would ever want to wargame. And they say it seems to get less interest. Why do we think that is?
Because it's dull. Because the Russian infantry are so monolithically slow. It's like watching an iceberg, a glacier inch its way down a valley. And I just think the weaponry is kind of out of sync with the tactics of the period. They're still very much lining up in a Napoleonic fashion, but the weaponry has improved to a great degree. I mean, there are some nice figures out there for it, and I have researched it and looked into it, and I honestly thought this has the makings of an extraordinarily dull period.
I'm not so sure about that. I think it's got stuff to offer at a campaign level that it might not offer on the tabletop.
Yeah.
I think one of the difficulties about those wars which are fought in quite a close geographical area like the Crimean Peninsula is that there's not a lot of engagements in history. There's Balaclava and there's the Alma, obviously, and there's the sieges. But there's not a huge number of different engagements on variable terrain. I mean, the Crimean Peninsula, is fairly sort of unpopulated at that time. You've not got many sort of different engagements. The supply is, I think, predominantly by sea, isn't it? Obviously, it's all about the supply lines and the advances. It's not a very, it doesn't seem to be a varied sort of terrain in which you can craft the sort of variety of games that you might with a set of rules like Sharp Practice. But that being said, I have seen a number of games where people have done it, and it does look very pretty. Certainly the English, the French, the Sardinians, and the Russian cavalry and the Cossacks do have a certain allure to them. So it's certainly something I'd play, but yeah, I think that might be one or two of the problems. Nick, sorry.
I think one of the things with Crimea, and I'm thinking about the games that I've seen, is that they appear to be, and the rules also seem to reflect this for the Crimea, they just seem to be the same as Napoleonic from a gaming perspective. I see a game, it looks Napoleonic. When it's presented, it tends to look like a Napoleonic game. The rules that I've seen them play with look like Napoleonic rules. And I kind of think, well, I'll just play Napoleonics. There's more option and more variety there.
Yeah, and much more interesting tactics, and the weaponry isn't quite as overwhelming. You know, these guys are using rifled muskets. I mean, they're the level of casualties is going to be high, and advancing in these huge block masses like the Russians did is not going to end well.
I'm sure there's more to it than I realised.
Which is why so little of the war was actually fought in open battles, and it came down to the siege of Sebastopol, really.
Yeah.
And there are some excellent opportunities in that for things like Kriegsspiels, where you're looking into the details of siege warfare and sapping trenches and so on and so forth. But I honestly don't think I could be bothered. I think life's too short. I'd rather go and play something else.
Well,
sorry to anybody who really loves the Crimean War, but it just doesn't do it for me.
Very good. Well, thanks a lot, 39. Hope we've helped with that question. Matthew Mello follows up with that with a really interesting point, actually, saying late American Civil War has similar issues to the Crimean War. And I can certainly see, Matthew, why you say that. I've always thought that the later stages of the American Civil War, some really interesting campaigns in the wilderness. I mean, I think that those are quite unique, and what Grant was trying to do in that campaign replays very well, possibly in a smaller scale, sort of 10 mil and 6 mil. But I can certainly see why you mentioned that, Matthew. Steve in Manchester sent us a great question. Is there any prospect of larger scale rules being produced in the near future? Steve's thinking of something along the lines of Napoleonic at core level, or possibly a medieval set with a few hundred / 1,000 figures on the table. I mean, most of the games you've been producing, guys, have been with, say, small numbers of figures, quite manageable, 28 mil scale. But I know that's not all that you've done in the past. Have you got any thoughts for Steve on that question?
Well, Reiswitz Press, General Darmay sounds like the game that he is looking for there. We've got a new supplement coming out tomorrow. It's all been set out and all the editing done, and it's just having its final proofread through the Vittoria campaign. So that's going to be good. But yeah, my real interest in military history is about understanding and finding out about infantry tactics, all tactics at a relatively low level, and consequently that leads me to games at that kind of level. I'm interested in the fine detail that really differentiates one period from another. The idea of doing a big battle game where I'm moving a huge division over here and I'm moving a huge division over there. Well, am I playing Napoleonics, or am I playing the Crimean War? Or am I playing American Civil War in some situations? I just feel that it's like a microscope. I like to zoom in and look at the detail. Other people are good at zooming out and looking at the big picture. And I think that's why Reiswitz Press and the work that Dave Brown is doing there complements what we're doing at toofatlardies very well, because we're tending to look at slightly different levels. And of course, O Group is for battalion plus actions in the Second World War, which it takes it up that level, whereas we've done platoon and company level. Then Dave's taken that up to battalion or brigade level with O Group. So it's a nice balance between toofatlardies on one side and Reiswitz Press on the other side.
Very good. Well, changing the pace a little bit from games to something a bit more broader. Mike Hock in California asks, what do you think the legacy of lard will be? So it's a bit of a broader question. We're going to come back to some more specific rules in a minute. I'm going to turn to you, Nick, because I can see you laughing.
Yeah.
Who was that question from?
That's
who's the question from?
In California.
Oh.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay, what was the question?
What do you think the legacy of lard will be?
Liver damage.
A full recycling bin. I don't know. It's never going to end, is it? It's going to go on forever.
Right. Okay. I love the optimism in the middle of a pandemic. We're all going to last forever. I think, being serious, if we had to say that there was going to be a legacy of lard, it's the community and the fact that when wargamers used to get together to go for a weekend's gaming, they would tend to do it in a competitive environment. And, excuse me, whilst a lot of people, I'm sure, whilst I'm sure, you know, a lot of them had a good time, I certainly know from the very few competitions that I've seen, a lot of people going, that bloke over there's a rotten sod, he stitched me up, and and seen umpires being called over. And I think what we've done is provide an antidote to that, where people can meet up and game in a really positive environment where everybody has a laugh and people are just there to enjoy playing the games. I'm not saying we're unique in that, but what I am saying is that I think that it's something that that's really important to all of us, I know. And hopefully, some people out there have appreciated the fact that we're part of a bigger community. And I think, especially in lockdown, that's something we've tried to respond by producing more material. So
yeah,
that's it.
Good point, mate. Well made. I think you're right. I think the antidote to wargaming, that's an interesting idea. I could settle for that.
So following on from that, Leslie...
Sydney, before you go on, I know you're in charge, mate, but I want to address the KMH2 issues that are going up the screen. And the only thing I'm going to say on this is that I made an order on Firestorm Games today. I bought some Testors Dull Coat from Firestorm Games, and as I was going into my checkout and I looked at the £6 something DPD delivery charge, I thought, I'm only getting 3 cans of spray and I'm paying £6 delivery. Why don't I get something else to go with it? And I was looking at the Black Sea ships, because I think if there's KMH2, people are going to want to play it with Black Sea ships as well as Langton stuff. And I so nearly bought some Black Sea ships, but I didn't. I didn't buy them. I didn't buy the Black Sea ships. So KMH2 is still a little bit further out there than I'd like it to be. I'd love to be doing it, but I'm not doing it yet.
Yeah, can I just pick up on that and say that if anybody said to me 18 months ago, do you fancy writing a set of ancient large skirmish rules, I'd have said no, not in the slightest. It will never happen. So it's one of those things, all these things could suddenly appear and become front of mind. And
yeah, I would love to do it. And it would only be something like that would trigger it, something new. We played a Napoleonic naval Kriegspiel on Discord. Well, it wasn't really a Kriegspiel, it was more of a role play, really. And that really tickled me as well. So, if the fire is still alive there somewhere.
Very good. Well, moving on from the legacy of lard, or potential legacy, to another legacy. So there was a very good question on Twitter from Leslie in Australia, who asked what...
Liz, is that Liz Pedersen?
Liz, g'day, Liz.
G'day, Liz.
True. Well, Leslie in Australia asked, what changes from the past few weeks will you keep after the lockdown ends? So Leslie very optimistically thinking about the end of lockdown while we're all still here in our respective homes. But I thought that was a great question. I don't know what you two are going to take away from it. I'm certainly going to take 1 or 2 things away. Yeah. Or getting related, let's say.
Self-isolation for the mother-in-law is the thing to enjoy.
I think I've really enjoyed not having to be in the same room as you two. And I intend to do a lot more of that in future. I think the Discord games, it got us back Discording, didn't it, Nick? We had such a fabulous Discord game about a year ago. The kind of the fall off from it was that we thought, wow, that was incredible, and we couldn't really summon up the energy to try and do it again, because you thought, how could we compete with the whole Peaches scenario down in wherever on earth it was? But actually, this has got us back into it, and I'm just about to start thinking about doing some other stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think recognizing that there are different ways to game, and solo gaming. Pat in Scotland sent me a document today with some suggestions about solo gaming, which, thanks, Pat. If you're watching, I haven't had a chance to look through it yet, but I am going to, because I think there's, I've really enjoyed the solo gaming that I've been doing, and I think that's something I'm going to continue doing.
It's made us look at different things, hasn't it? We've done more on Discord. Richard, you and I are playing a game on Roll20 next week.
Apparently,
with Jeremy, we're doing. I think you're playing as well, Sid.
I am. I've got the app.
Have a go. We wouldn't have done that before lockdown, probably. So that's going to be different. We're looking forward to that.
We wouldn't have done this before lockdown, and we could do this again in future. I mean, really, when we record an oddcast, a lot of people think we're, maybe stitching it together in 27 takes and we cut things out. We really don't. Sometimes I say things so outrageous that we have to remove that. But I'm quite prepared to be on my best behaviour doing something like this.
Is that why you're on the water tonight, Rich?
That is why I'm drinking water tonight, yeah.
I think to answer Leslie's question, two things I'll take away is how much I've enjoyed the club night. Before lockdown, I used to commute to London from home, which is about 35 miles, 5 days a week. I would imagine even after lockdown, I won't be doing that again. And certainly, I've really enjoyed the virtual club night much more than I sort of, and I think to myself, what was I ever doing sort of being at work on a Tuesday night? So actually refresh enjoyment of simple things like just getting together with friends and really making an effort to go to the club more often. I think the other thing is just having a bit of time, and because you're isolating at home, just having that extra 15, 30 minutes a day just to do some painting or some hobby. And it's amazing what you get done when you add all that together. So to answer Leslie's questions, those are two habits which I think are good habits that I don't want to lose after lockdown finishes. Let's move on to a couple of questions which I thought were similar, but two really good questions which I picked out on Twitter during the week. They're all about weapons and warfare and how people fight. So first off, Fall on Pell Mell says, when you guys have been researching rules, have you had your ideas about warfare challenged? For instance, in Infamy, has any research into the Romans or Celts altered the way you thought or think about how they fought? And I think that's a generic question for every set of rules you've written, whether it's What a Tanker, Infamy, Sharp Practice, or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. Excuse me. So, the first thing that I have to do when I'm writing a set of rules is establish whether I'm going to be interested in it. And that can be anything from reading a Bernard Cornwell novel just to see, do I fancy this? Or, picking up an Osprey maybe just to get a basic idea. But then once I've done that and think, yeah, I am going to invest in this, then it's a case of doing quite a lot of pretty heavy research. And the starting point from that has to be dump all the preconceived ideas that I've got in my head. And it's a discipline that I have learned a long time ago. And it's quite easy because I have the memory of a goldfish. So it's fairly easy for me to dump everything I knew previously and really just start the research and not try and let the research take me to a particular point, but to allow the research to take me wherever the research takes me. And that is usually somewhere quite surprising. So, yes, every time I do research, I find that I end up probably somewhere where I never thought I was going to be by using a sort of following a trail of clues almost. It's like a bit like detective work, but you can't have preconceived ideas. So, yeah, every time.
I think there's always the challenge of of official all bats versus lived reality that always comes through to me every time you read accounts. You know, I know what the standard composition of an infantry platoon is. So why are they talking to me about having different weapons than they got in the all bat? Okay, this is where reality doesn't necessarily survive contact with that kind of academic structure, if you like. So for instance, everything from platoon size to weapons used. US paras are the worst for it. Every account you read, that makes you think the actual organisation was so different to the paper organisation. Lots of different weapons being used. And I think there's still a lot of stuff also that we get wrong as war gamers, that every time you read the history is reinforced to me. Houses are interesting. As war gamers, we always put figures in houses. They're like a magnet, aren't they, in the battlefields? But actually, a lot of the accounts you read, people don't go into the houses. They're dug in the garden. Well, if you're a war gamer, you'd never dig in the garden. You go in the hard cover of the house. So there's something there we don't get quite right, I think, that's always worth challenging. It's we never have enough smoke on the table. We always allow people to see further than they can see in reality. And there's never enough rubble either. When we create rubble, there's never enough of it. Well, look at the photos of rubble. It's just everywhere. And our rubble is like a small pile that you could take to the dump in the boot of your car. So a lot of that kind of stuff, I think, is stuff we could do better.
I think one of the difficult things is when you're looking at scenarios or creating rules or just games on the table, you often approach a period thinking that you want to replicate a certain sort of tactic or certain unit which operates in a particular way. And the more you read about it, going through those games and playing those experiences and designing those scenarios, you sometimes find that, well, the truth is very different and it performs in a completely different way and you end up with a different game. So that's a very good question by Fall On. And then I think we had a great question from Oleg in Russia. Hello, Oleg. Why do you think there's a tendency amongst wargamers to attribute almost mystical qualities to certain weapons? Oleg gave the example of the katana, obsidian-bladed clubs of the Mexican, Welsh longbow, but I think you can probably also say things like the Tiger tank, for instance. Why do we, as wargamers, like to attribute those war-winning or battle-winning abilities to weapons all the time?
The 88mm gun seed is a good example of that. And I think if you read the accounts again, people write about things that have a big psychological impact. And that might not necessarily be the thing that delivers the victory or the defeat. So, you attribute the win to the fact that you had an 88mm gun because that's the most obvious thing that seemed to make a difference to you. It's a bit like having the big kid in the football game. If you've ever been to a kid's football match and there's one big kid who's bigger than all the others, you tend to say, oh, they won because they've got the big kid, even though the big kid's probably a complete, football ignoramus and not as skilled as some of the other kids. You still tend to say that that's the reason they won. And I think we put these mystical qualities on these things that sometimes have psychological impact and not necessarily on technical or operational combat. That would be my view on that.
Richard,
I think it's a cool effect. Oh, we all that cool stuff. So I think sometimes you find that people attack attributes to things because they think they're cool. They think they must be really cool. In fact, better than everything else. But I guess that's human nature. I mean, we've had an issue, as we were play testing Infamy, with people saying British war dogs. What about British war dogs? Because they're really cool. And I said, yeah, but they didn't exist. It's complete made up rubbish. So I said, well, look, if you want to use them as an ambush point or deployment point on the table, because they look cool. And so some blokes brought his pooches along to a battle, but but because it's cool, when you actually research it, you have to, again, it's about dumping the preconceived ideas you've got and doing that research to find out what really happened. But that's my job, not anybody else's job. So they can, if they want cool, go with it. Why not? It's fun. We all like a bit of cool, don't we?
Man. It's always nice when you've got new people joining a game who might not have played that period before, because they will have always heard about the Welsh longbow. You're playing a medieval game, or they'll have heard about the 88 gun, and you're setting up a desert campaign game from 1941, or a period like that. I think those are always things that draw people into a game. And if people come out from the game having a different view, then that's all the more interesting. Rich, were you just going to jump in there?
Yeah, I was going to say, most weapons are like rock, paper, scissors, aren't they? There's whilst the scissors are really good at bashing the hell out of paper, when they come up against a rock, they lose. So however cool the weapon is, there's a rock out there somewhere that's got its name on it.
And there's also something about it's more than just technical, isn't it? So the example I'm thinking of there is Bag the Hun, when we were looking at aircraft technical specifications. And you look at the aircraft, you look at two very similar aircraft, and the technical specifications are very, very close together. But you read the accounts of how they're used and how they're flown and the combat victories that they were part of, and the way they perform is totally different. Now, what's the reality there? Because the technical specification is giving you one view, and you can't argue with that data. And yet the guys that were there are telling you another. So where do you pitch that? And I think with aircraft and with any kind of war where it's a technical, there's the rivet counters, if you like, have a field day. Any game that's got that aspect to it, it's very easy to do the comparison and say, top trump style, this will always beat that. And well, it didn't.
No. Well, I bought a car a few years ago, and they said, "Oh, this is tremendously eco-friendly, and you'll get 48 miles to the gallon. And here's all the figures that prove that." I got 24 miles to the bleeding gallon. Well, okay, I have got a rather heavy right foot, but nevertheless, it proves the point. Manuals will tell you this is what this weapon, this vehicle can do. But you have to listen to the people who actually operated with them and take that into account. Because that's their life experience. Sean, you're right. Dogs will be asked about forever on the foot page, and I forever will say they did not exist. Carry on, Sydney. Your go.
My go. Well, I think that I can't really say anything about war dogs. I mean, they just always seem to me to be kind of just a crazy addition. But I'm not an expert in war dogs or any dogs, in fact. But I think it's just one of those things, isn't it? The people who are attracted to so-called battle-winning weapons. But people aren't always attracted to logistics, which is much more battle-winning. Have you actually got ships to ferry your army up to Berwick, for instance? Have you got the enough food to supply your army? Well, that's
Richard and I were talking about this earlier on, Sid. We had a conversation about Kriegspiel games and how many times the battle is won before the battle is joined.
Yeah.
Oh, big time. Yeah, big time. And funnily enough, there are different ways of gaming these different experiences. You talk about logistics. That's got to be in a Kriegspiel. It's highly unlikely it's going to be in a tabletop encounter. But they're, different tools for different jobs. You don't hammer a nail in with a paintbrush. You don't paint a wall with a hammer.
I think that's exactly right. And it always depends on the background to the game that you want to bring out. If you want a game to really focus on different tactics between different sides, you're not going to immerse somebody in the supply logistics of 19th century American Civil War. You're really going to want to immerse yourself into different sort of battle lines and terrain as much as anything else. Anyway, we're moving up to 9 o'clock quite rapidly. So a couple of quick fire questions. We have a question from Jeremy in Bury. As manager and agent for the Toofatlardies crew, how does Sid influence Richard and Nick's dress sense? I've not actually noticed I have, Jeremy.
You haven't. You really haven't.
Yeah.
I am wearing an Etruscan red polo shirt.
I think that's probably more burgundy, but we'll leave that aside.
Right.
I guess, Sid's dress, I would say, Sid, you reminded me that you should never sit on a lattice chair in bare legs.
Moving on. Thank you very much. Tom in Sheffield, my good friend Tom, says, who's the most famous person you know who uses Lardy rules?
Mike Hobbs.
Sydney. Sydney Ramwood, official toofatlardies, pseudo-celebrity.
Famous. Do we know any famous people? I don't know if we do yet. It's not like Dungeons and Dragons when Vin Diesel or somebody like that would come out and say, I like going to the village of Homlet or whatever it is. But I don't think we know. We possibly don't know anyone who's really famous, not genuinely famous. Who knows? But it's a nice question all the same.
Bloody optimistic one.
Darren in Australia, I thought this was a good one. I know we said we wouldn't talk about infamy, but I thought this is a great question from Darren down under in Australia, Struth Cobber. So Darren asks, will infamy ever cross the vague border between ancients and dark ages? Can I dust off my Vikings and Anglo-Danes from Saga in anticipation?
No. And actually, in answer to somebody else's question, when are we going to see the next video in the Ducks series? Because if I were going to go down that route, I'd do it as an extension of Ducks. Sid and I had a game of Ducks planned to film for Lard TV, and of course, this lockdown has meant that never happened. But it is on the cards, and it is being planned. So I don't really see infamy going that far, but it might. I've got the first 2 supplements planned, which, as we said, was Greeks, Macedonians, Carthage, Punic Wars, Spanish, Lusitanians, Iberians, Numidians, all around that area of the Mediterranean, and then following that up with the Eastern nations. So we're going to be going, Dacia and their mates and out further east. So you never know after that, but I mean, that's far enough planning into the future for me.
Well, that's a good answer. So hopefully that sorted that one out for you, Darren. Sam Gertz in Antwerpen asks, would toofatlardies ever consider doing a pike and shot English Civil War, 30 Years' War, mid-17th century-ish rule set along the same lines as Sharp Practice and Infamy? Well, maybe I take this one, Sam. I mean, Sam, I think there have been a couple of absolutely fantastic supplements in the toofatlardies annuals that we've produced, or summer specials and Christmas specials. There's a couple on the English Civil War. I don't know if there's one on the 30 Years' War, but it should easily be adaptable. And I think you guys have played in some terrific games of the 80 Years' War, which people have put on at Lard Days in the past. I think it's a period that once the real focus, I think when we've played those games before, part of the focus is getting the pikes right for smaller stage games. And when you go bigger, it's kind of dealing with the cavalry and the fact that the cavalry generally oppose the cavalry. One side chases the other one off, and that quite historically changes the dynamic, like in quite a few battles. But so Sam, I'm not sure it'd be a standalone game, but people have produced material for that in the past, and those games have been pretty good.
Well, in the buff was something that we tried. The question is whether it ever goes anywhere. It's one of those things that I'm very interested in the period. I'm not sure whether large-scale Sharp Practice size skirmish would work, but who knows? We have seen it at Lardy Games Days. I played a fantastic game of Sharp Practice for the Tudor period, which Colin put on at Clotted Lard 2 years ago. It was inspirational. At one point, I considered chinning him, knocking him out, and stealing all his figures and doing a runner. That was so nice, but I didn't, because he's Scottish and he'd probably give me a Chinese burn or something.
Well, it's a terrific period, and it's one I've been tempted many times, moving from 1688 maybe to 1588. But who knows? Maybe that's for next year. Anyway,
Wow.
We're moving up to 9 o'clock, and we've probably just got one question left from Fraser in Bristol. Hello, Fraser. Are there any companies or individuals that you'd like to collaborate with on the project? And if so, who?
Disney.
Yeah. I think, when they make a film of Sharp Practice, I think I could see myself starring in that somewhere.
I'll tell you what I'd like. I'd like to play some of our games at some of the museum sites. I'd love to play What a Tanker at the Tank Museum. Right,
Yeah.
that would be great. I'd love to play Bag the Hun at Duxford, although actually we have wargamed at Duxford, but not Bag the Hun. I'd love to play any of the sort of chain of command at the National Army Museum or at the Hartenstein. That would be really good. That kind of partnership, I think, would be excellent. You know, really good value and really good, really interesting, really good fun, and get the message out that the wargaming is not just for sad wargamers; it's also for sad people who go to museums.
We did a game of Through the Mud and the Blood at Bovington in 2012. I think you were there for that, Rich.
Yeah, that abysmal show. I mean, I didn't really enjoy. I didn't really enjoy that, but that was the time when the weather was so dreadful, and the only options that the kids couldn't go to Monkey World up the road because it was pissing down with rain. So they arrived like an avalanche of hideous children, like slurry, sort of zooming across the floor of the Tank Museum. And we were doing a game based on, I think it was Combray or something like that. And there were just these monstrous little brats just putting their sticky fingers all over everything. And it wasn't the best experience I've had. But
I think What a Tanker would be great for the Tank Museum. I don't know why our licensing man hasn't done it already.
What's that, mate? Sorry?
I said, I think What a Tanker would be great for the Tank Museum. I don't know why our licensing man isn't already negotiating the deal. And imagine playing Kiss Me Hardy on Trafalgar Day in the historic dockyard at Portsmouth.
So,
well, very true. I mean, I just can't understand why they haven't phoned us.
Well, those are all things for the future, as indeed our future oddcast, because we've just about come to the end of this one. That was certainly a lot of questions. Thanks very much for people on the public chat and also on Twitter for supplying those questions. But before we go, we're briefly going to talk about the Lard Island Library. Sadly, the building's in dark because we're in lockdown here on Lard Island, but that hasn't stopped us reading. So, chaps, what's been on your reading list this week?
Well, I've got them here. I reread this. I say reread it. I last read that when I was about 9 years old. The Eagle of the Ninth. It's the classic book of the Eagle of the Ninth, funnily enough. It's a children's book.
Is that a golfing book?
Huh?
Is it a golfing book? Is it a golfing book? Somebody explain the joke.
Very good. Yeah, very good. It's the Albatross of the 14th.
The Albatross on the 3rd.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good fun. It was a bit of jolly fun. I just thought, I've been doing so much heavy research. I thought I'm going to read a bit of fiction, and I thought go back to this. It's a classic, and it was a trip down memory lane. I'm not sure I'd recommend it, but it was a pleasant read rather than a sort of huge inspiration. This, however, it's another old book by George Shipway, as we can see, called Imperial Governor. All right, Governor. And he's ex-military, ex-Indian Army. This was published in about 68 or 69. And I'm only in the first 100 pages of it at the moment, but I'm really liking the way he writes. He's written it as though it is the personal papers of Suetonius Paulinus, who was the governor of Britain at the time of Boudicca, depending on how you want to say it, revolt. And I thought this was really, really good fun. If you want to read accounts of Romans fighting Britons, you tend to go to Caesar because, first-hand account and all that. But by the time of this period, which is like 100 or so years later, 120 years later, there's not a lot of first-hand material around, if any. So this is quite a nice, interesting view. It almost like, the Flashman papers were written as though they were the diaries of Flashman. Mm-hmm. This is doing the same thing, but it's not. It's a bit drier. But it's well written, and it's written by a guy who was a professional soldier and therefore understands warfare. So I'm really enjoying it. I think it's a really good book. So if you want to get into infamy and want a nice novel to read, I'd really recommend George Shipway's Imperial Governor. It's just a good read. Good read.
Good choice, Nick.
I've been having a bit of a clear out. I've got. Let me show you this. Richard, you recognise that?
I do. Back the Hun. My father was issued a copy of that in at some point during the Second World War. It's about deflection shooting, isn't it?
It's about deflection shooting. It's about what angle you need to be at to shoot down your foe.
Yeah.
And it's only a little, fantastic little book that we produced to train fighter pilots. And and it's what gave us the inspiration for Bag the Hun. I thought I'd show it to people because just to prove it exists. And in the back of it, it even has a little transparent gun sight.
Gotcha.
That you can line up on people as they're going to the bus stop and see what type of deflection angle you're taking out. So, that would be right between the eyes. And if I was moving at speed, you'd have to aim over there somewhere. Yeah. Luckily, I don't move at speed. So that was fun to find that and to dig that out. I've been rereading after a very long time. Many, many years ago, I read this book, which is 18 Platoon, which is Sidney Jarry's book. And it must have been a library copy that I read because I haven't had my own copy. But I was able to find my own copy, grab a copy recently for a good price. It tells a story of a platoon that goes through Northwest Europe, through from Normandy into Germany. Really interesting read. And the thing that put me in the mood for this was on the We Have Ways podcast, they were doing the Xeno book Cauldron, weren't they, talking about that. And it just tickled me a bit to read something along the same kind of line. Now, this is different. It's not the same style. It's not the same battle, obviously, but it is about a platoon and its story through the latter parts of the Second World War. So really interesting read. And the other one, and Rich, I don't know if you've got this book or not. This was given to me. It's a book by Amy Fox, Dr. Amy Fox, Learning to Fight. Yeah. It's about the British Army's learning from the First World War. And it goes back to the Discord game that we were playing the other day and how, the learning curve in the First World War was quite phenomenal. This explains how the British Army learned from its experiences to stay one step ahead of its foe. It's only a relatively small book, but it was given to me. It's a new publication, I believe. I haven't read it yet. I'm really looking forward to having a read of that.
She's a terrific young academic. I mean, she's I think she's been with Gary Sheffield down at University of Wolverhampton. She's a really good writer, and I've heard very good things about that. I mean, we've got a few people who follow lardy things like Dr. Spencer Jones, who's down there as well. And there's a real cluster of top flight academics working on the First World War down there. Rich, you were going to say something before I move to my book.
Yeah, no, that group came out of John Bourne's cluster of academics who were at the University of Birmingham previously. Really, these are the guys who are cutting edge in First World War studies. I was actually going to say quickly, Bartley Butsford said he's not impressed with my choice of historical fiction. What about Tacitus's Agricola? He's absolutely right. Tacitus wrote Agricola, which was the account of his, I think it was his father-in-law's campaigns in Britain fight at that point in time. You're absolutely right. When I said there were no sources, I was racking my brain. That's one of the problems of doing this live. You're quite right. Agricola is an excellent read, and you can often get that in a joint book with Tacitus's writings on Germany as well. So that's certainly my copy is a dual copy, just looking over at the shelves. But yeah, you're right. But I mean, that doesn't mean I don't enjoy this book, because I do. And if you don't like it, go and read something else.
And Richard, there's a question there about small unit actions from the Russian perspective on Second World War. I mean, from the Russian perspective, do you know of any? I can't, at the top of my head, I can't think of any that give that detail that I'll go to my bookshelf and reach out for. But there may be some. I've not read many.
One of the problems I always find, I mean, there are things like, I mean, I've got several books, Tank Rider and things like that. One of the problems with the books coming out of the Soviet Union is they write history in a totally different way. Not the Soviet Union, Russia now. Sorry, the books about the Soviet Union at the time is they tend to write their history in a rather hagiographic manner. It's very much about the Great Patriotic War and the struggle against the fascist invaders, and it very much tends to present it as, super heroic in a manner that we find a little bit false, because we tend to have books written in a. I'm not saying we haven't got hagiographic books in the West, but we do tend to find that there's a lot more balanced stuff out there. So I always struggle finding stuff about the Soviet Union in the Second World War because of that writing style. It does lead you to question how much of this is true. You might as well read Sven Hassel with some of it, to be honest. And that's a shame, because that is a shame, because it's, we all know that the sacrifice that the Soviet Union made during the Second World War. And what's fabulous when we go online is to see the number of people in Russia playing Chain of Command and other lardy games. And it's great that we've had Oleg on here sending us a message and asking us a question. So fraternal greetings to our comrades in that part of the world. But yeah, nevertheless, I don't know, Nick. I
don't know. I can't think of any either that I would go to and pull off the bookshelf. The internet, I always find Google Books can be quite helpful to search for this kind of thing. If you can search for the kind of thing they might say, if you can search for a term that you might find in a book, then that can help point you to a reference which is in Google Books. Google Books is really quite helpful, I think, sometimes. Sometimes you only get 3 or 4 pages, but sometimes that's enough to just give you an angle on something. So it's recommended to have a look at that. To answer the people that are asking about Sidney Jarry, he is 18 Platoon, D Company, 4th Battalion, Somerset Light Infantry.
It's a classic book, and it's one of the worst things about it is how bloody difficult it is to get hold of it. I had to go down to the Rifle Museum in Winchester to get my copy.
I got this one for about 20 odd quid, which I'm really pleased with, because the other ones that I've been looking at were coming in a lot more than that.
Yeah.
Twice as much. It's only a softback, but
mine's hardback.
Yeah, hardback.
Okay.
I'll come and swap it next time.
You probably will, mate. Yeah. We'll probably have you on film doing it.
Well, to finish off my book, I have been reading
I forgot about your book.
Yeah, I knew you had, but I thought I'd say it because I like to wrap things out. It's my OCD. So my book, I have almost finished The King's Army, which is the book
the book again
in lockdown, and this is all about the French Wars of Religion. As a book, it's just about one of the best books I've ever read. The way in which it presented the history of the Royal Army is just immaculate. Every single page you want to just read again immediately, because the way the author has put this together, Professor James Wood, is just exemplary. I mean, the whole of the interface between society, economy, warfare, and tactics on the battlefield is really seamlessly put together. I would strongly recommend that as one of the best books on warfare I've ever read. I am obviously biased for the Renaissance period, but it is an exemplary piece of writing, really deeply impressive. So that has been a lockdown book to treasure. And one of the worst things about the lockdown is obviously people can be quite anxious. Having a really great book which immerses you and which you spend an hour or two reading, and all of the concerns that we have just evaporate. That's really been what kind of great history books are all about, really, I think.
I thought you said it was about colouring.
Colouring, did you say?
Yeah. With your crayons. You said the great thing about books is when you can colour them in.
I don't remember saying that.
You did say that. That's why that book has got line drawings on the cover. That's why you bought it, so you could colour it in.
We've done so well on this podcast with that insult. It's a shame to finish in that vein, Richard.
There's a good note, by the way. There's a good comment in the
I think as we deteriorate and fray into personal insults, it's probably a great time to say thank you to everyone who has joined us.
Oh, hold on. Yeah, Andy Crow's made a really good point. I was racking my small unit actions during the German campaign in Russia, the US Army Summary. That's the book I was trying to think of. It's good.
Thank you, Andy.
I'm not sure where you get it. I download it online for free. It's just a free PDF somewhere.
I think Andy's saying it's you can Google it and grab a copy or see it somehow. I assume it's on Google Books rather than just a. Anyway, Google it and have a look.
Who publishes your books, Sid? Henry's asking.
Who's publishing the book? Well, the book is The King's Army by James B. Wood. It's in print at the moment by Cambridge University Press. It is a pricier book than some. I bought this one for £40, which seemed to me a lot of money, and I didn't buy it for a long time because it was £40. It's not a long book. It's only about 336 pages, but it repays that in every single page. And I think Vim asked that as well as Henry, very strongly.
Right.
Anyway, so thank you all for joining us this evening. Thank you for all the questions by Twitter. Thank you very much for the questions in the public chat. Thank you for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed the show, and we'll be back with more Lard TV on Oddcast soon. So I hope you can join us in the future going forward. And with that, it's a good night from me and
a good night from him.
Good night from him. Good night.
Good night. Thanks all for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed it, and we hope to be able to do something again very soon. So cheers all. Thank you.